3 days before my 29th birthday, I found out my mother had been hiding $1.8 million from me for 7 years. The money belonged to me. My father had left it behind when he died, and the woman who raised me had spent nearly a decade pretending it did not exist. Before I touched a single cent of it, before I hired a single attorney or signed a single document, I needed to know something. I needed to know who in my life would actually show up for me if I had nothing. My name is Claire. I am a 29-year-old pediatric occupational therapist working at a children's rehabilitation center in a mid-sized city in Ohio. I am the kind of person who brings homemade soup to sick colleagues and remembers every single one of my patients' birthdays. I grew up believing that made me part of a loving family. I was wrong about almost everything. The call that changed my life came on a Thursday afternoon. A probate attorney named Howard Greer had been trying to reach me for 3 weeks before he finally got through on my office line. He was calm, professional, and slightly apologetic as he explained that my father had established an irrevocable life insurance trust in my name the year before he passed. The beneficiary was me and only me. The trust had matured on my 22nd birthday, 7 years ago, and had been sitting untouched in a holding account ever since, quietly accumulating interest because nobody had ever notified me that it existed. The total value, including 7 years of compound interest on the original $1.3 million policy payout, was $1.84 million. I sat in my car in the parking garage after that call for 45 minutes without moving. My hands were perfectly still on the steering wheel. My brain simply refused to process the number. Then, very slowly, one thought rose above the rest. My mother had known. She was listed as the original point of contact on the trust documents. The attorney's office had sent certified letters to her address for years. She had signed for them. She had signed for them and said nothing to me. Not once, across 7 entire years of me struggling through grad school on student loans, of me eating rice and canned beans 3 nights a week during my clinical internship, of me calling her once in tears because my car needed a $400 repair I could not afford, and she had told me to figure it out because I had chosen a low-paying career path. I did not call her that evening. I did not call anyone. I drove home, made tea, and sat with the weight of what I now knew. My childhood neighborhood was the kind of place where everything looked perfectly maintained from the street. My mother, Margaret, had always cared intensely about appearances. She hosted elaborate dinner parties and volunteered visibly at the country club's charity events and wore the right brands and said the right things to the right people. My older brother Derek was her obvious favorite, a regional finance manager at a pharmaceutical company who drove a luxury sedan and talked loudly about his investment portfolio at every family gathering. My younger sister Renee had positioned herself as a successful interior designer with a glossy Instagram presence and a downtown studio. I was the soft one, the one who worked with disabled children for a salary my mother described, without irony, as noble but impractical. What I did not know at the time, what I was about to discover, was that the financial stability my family projected so carefully was almost entirely fabricated. But first, I needed to run the test. The idea came to me 2 days after Howard Greer's call, while I was driving past my neighbor Maya's apartment on the way home from the grocery store. Maya lived in the unit directly below mine. She was 32, a certified nursing assistant who worked the morning shift at a long-term care facility and then spent 4 evenings a week waitressing at a chain restaurant near the highway. She was raising her 7-year-old daughter Lily almost entirely alone. Her daughter's father had been out of the picture since Lily was an infant. Maya drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a cracked rear bumper, and she meal prepped on Sunday afternoons so she and Lily could eat well on a tight budget. She knocked on my door one evening in February to ask if I had an extra onion because she was making Lily's favorite soup and had forgotten one at the store. We had been friends ever since. I thought about how Maya once covered my shift at a community food drive when I had a stomach bug, even though she had worked a double the day before. I thought about how she had texted me last winter when she noticed my car had been sitting in the same spot for 3 days, worried that something had happened to me. I thought about how she knew absolutely nothing about my family's money or my father's trust, and she treated me with the same warmth either way. Then I thought about my mother's voice the last time I mentioned money troubles. "Figure it out, Claire. You made your career choices. I needed to know. Not because I doubted Maya. Because I needed the truth about everyone else to be undeniable before I decided how to use $1.84 million. On a Wednesday evening, I called my mother first. I forced a controlled tremble into my voice and told her that my landlord had just delivered a formal eviction notice. I explained that I had made a serious error in my checking account calculations, that my automatic rent payment had bounced, and that I needed to pay $900 in back rent plus a $150 late fee by Friday morning, or I would be removed from my apartment. I told her I had no savings buffer because of an unexpected car insurance premium and I was desperate. Could she help me with just this one thing? Just this once? I would pay her back within 2 weeks. There was a pause. The kind that feels deliberate. Claire, my mother said, and her tone carried the particular brand of exhausted disappointment she reserved exclusively for conversations with me. Derek's engagement party is this Saturday. I have the caterers coming tomorrow to finalize the menu, and I still need to confirm the floral arrangements by end of day. I simply cannot be dealing with your financial emergencies right now. You are a grown professional woman. You need to build an emergency fund like a responsible adult. I said I understood and ended the call. I sat with that for a moment. Then I called Derek. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. 11 minutes later, he sent a text message that read, "Can't do loans right now. We're in the middle of buying a house. Ask Mom." I did not call Renee. Renee had borrowed $600 from me 18 months earlier for what she called a temporary cash flow issue and had never mentioned it again. I already knew her answer. I sat on my couch in the quiet of my apartment and pulled up Maya's contact. My thumbs hovered over the screen for a long moment. Part of me felt genuinely guilty for what I was about to do, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. I called her. "Hey, you okay?" She answered immediately. It was 9:15 at night, and she had worked a full shift. I used the same trembling voice. "Eviction notice. Friday deadline. $950. I am so sorry to ask. I don't know who else to call." The line went quiet for just a few seconds. "Okay," Maya said. "Not that's a lot of money or, let me think about it. Just okay. I have about $400 in my checking account right now. I can bring it up tonight. And I have a credit card I've been keeping clear for emergencies. I think there's room on it for the rest. Let me check the limit and I'll be up in 10 minutes. I told her not to come up yet, that I needed to handle something first. I thanked her and told her I would call her right back. I sat very still for a long time after that. Then I cried. Not from sadness. From something more complicated than sadness. The test was over. I knew everything I needed to know. I called Howard Greer the next morning and told him I was ready to move forward. He walked me through the claims process and connected me with a financial advisor his firm worked with regularly. I spent the following 2 weeks quietly doing something my family would have found inconceivable. I was learning about what I actually had, and I was starting to ask questions about the people who had kept it from me. The financial advisor, a precise and methodical woman named Sandra, flagged something during our initial consultation that made her set down her pen and look at me carefully. "Before I advise you on how to structure these assets," she said, "I think you should understand one thing. The trust documentation shows your mother was notified 7 separate times over 5 years. At some point, the correspondence stopped, likely because the trust entered a dormancy protocol. But the notification history is well documented." I told her I already knew. Then I told her what I wanted to do. Sandra connected me with a forensic accountant named Philip, who specialized in exactly the kind of quiet, methodical investigation I had in mind. I gave him 3 names: my mother, Margaret, my brother Derek, my sister Renee. I told him to start wherever the trail was warmest and report back within 10 days. I also told him my budget was not a concern. Philip came back to me in 8 days. He sat across from me in Sandra's conference room and opened a folder with the careful deliberateness of someone who had delivered difficult information many times before. He started with Renee. My sister's interior design studio had a beautiful website and a curated portfolio of projects that looked impressive until you looked closely at the dates and the client names. Philip had pulled her business registration records and her state contractor's license history. Renee's license had lapsed 14 months ago and had not been renewed. Her last verified completed project was 20 months prior. The studio address on her website was a shared co-working space she rented by the day for client meetings to maintain the illusion of a real office. Her social media showed weekly posts of new projects and client reveals that Philip's team traced to stock photography and, in 2 cases, images lifted from other designers' published portfolios. Renee was not a working interior designer. She was performing the role of one for an audience that included, apparently, our entire family. Her personal finances matched the performance. She carried $180,000 in credit card debt across 9 accounts, all opened within the past 3 years. She was 8 weeks behind on the lease for her actual apartment. The luxury SUV she drove had been purchased by co-signing the loan with Derek's name attached, a favor Derek had apparently decided to cash in on when he needed leverage with her, for reasons Philip had not yet fully traced. Then Philip turned to Derek. My brother, the finance manager who talked confidently about index funds and market cycles at every family dinner, had lost his entire personal savings 2 years ago in a series of high-risk, concentrated stock bets that went catastrophically wrong. What Philip's team found was that Derek had not stopped there. He had taken out a home equity line of credit against my mother's house. Not a new mortgage, but a revolving line of credit that he had drawn against repeatedly over 18 months to cover margin calls and feed subsequent bets. The total drawn was $340,000. My mother did not know. The documents bore what appeared to be her signature, but Philip's handwriting analyst flagged 2 of the key authorization forms as inconsistent with samples of her genuine signature from other documents in the record. Derek had likely forged them. He was the executor of her financial accounts, the trusted son she had handed the passwords to, the reliable one. The bank had sent delinquency notices. Derek had intercepted them. Philip found the forwarding address change request Derek had submitted on the account, quietly rerouting all correspondence to a P.O. box Derek controlled. My mother was sitting in her beautiful home with her caterers and her floral arrangements, completely unaware that her favorite child had borrowed $340,000 against it and stopped making payments 4 months ago. I leaned back in my chair and processed that for a long, quiet moment. Then Philip laid down the final piece, and it was the one I had not anticipated at all. 7 years ago, when my father's trust had first matured and the notification letters began arriving at my mother's address, Margaret had not simply ignored them. She had responded to the initial inquiry from Howard Greer's predecessor at the firm. She had indicated in writing that the listed beneficiary, meaning me, was unreachable and uninterested in financial matters, and had requested that correspondence be suspended while the family sorted out estate complexities. The firm had complied for a period, before eventually transitioning to the dormancy protocol. My mother had actively intervened to delay my notification. She had not simply failed to tell me, she had told them not to tell me. Philip closed the folder. What would you like to do with this? He asked. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. I simply cannot be dealing with your financial emergencies right now. I thought about Maya's voice. Okay. I smiled, and I told Philip exactly what I wanted to do. The occasion presented itself naturally. Derek's engagement party was that Saturday, a catered affair in my mother's backyard, with 40 guests including extended family, neighbors, and several of Derek's colleagues from the pharmaceutical company. My mother had been planning it for 3 months. It was, in her estimation, the social event of her season. I arrived deliberately late and deliberately understated. I wore a plain navy dress I had owned for 2 years and flat shoes. I had not bothered with much makeup. I walked through the garden gate and immediately clocked the layout. Rented chairs and linens, a catering station, a champagne tower that Renee was photographing from 3 angles for her Instagram story. Derek stood near the house with his fiancée, holding a glass of something expensive, laughing loudly. My mother was in the center of everything in a cream-colored blazer, accepting compliments. She spotted me, and her expression did the thing it always did. A brief, involuntary flicker of disappointment she could not quite suppress before arranging her face into something more acceptable. Claire, she said, kissing the air near my cheek. You could have made a bit more of an effort, darling. There are people here from Derek's company. I told her she looked wonderful, and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server. For the first hour, I circulated quietly. I spoke to relatives I had not seen in years. I complimented Derek's fiancée, who seemed genuinely lovely and entirely unaware of the financial disaster her future husband was navigating. I watched Renee hold court near the catering table, performing the confident, successful, creative professional with practiced ease. Then Derek found me. He had been drinking since before I arrived. I could tell by the slight looseness around his eyes. He pulled me away from a conversation with our aunt and steered me toward the edge of the garden near the fence. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, and his voice was the one he used when he wanted to seem casual while not being casual at all. "Mom mentioned you called her last week with some kind of money situation." I told him it had been resolved. "Right, good," he said. He looked at the house. "Look, the thing is, there's actually an opportunity I've been thinking about that involves you. Dad left some property, right? That undeveloped lot out past Millbrook? I know it's technically been sitting in legal limbo since the estate wasn't fully settled." I kept my expression neutral. My father had purchased 14 acres of undeveloped land in a rural township 12 years before he passed. At the time, it was worth very little. Philip had checked on it. The state had approved a new logistics corridor 6 months ago, and a distribution infrastructure project had just been mapped directly through that township. The land was now worth, conservatively, $900,000. My sister Renee appeared at Derek's elbow with the timing of someone who had been listening nearby and waiting for her cue. "We were actually talking about this before you arrived," Renee said smoothly. "Derek's firm has a connection with a land-holding group that's interested in rural acquisition. It would be a fast close. We could probably get you $80,000 for it, which honestly is good money for an empty field you've never even visited." I looked at her, then at Derek. "That's interesting," I said. "Let me think about it." Derek's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "It's kind of a now or never thing with these groups. They move fast." "I understand," I said. "I'll have my attorney look at it." "Your attorney?" Derek said. "Claire, you don't need to make this complicated. It's a straightforward." "Derek," I said, and something in my tone made him stop. I said I'll have my attorney look at it. I excused myself and walked back toward the center of the party. 30 minutes later, my mother tapped a champagne flute and asked everyone to gather. She gave a small speech about Derek and his fiancée, about family and love and futures. Derek stood beaming. Renee stood beside him, smiling her curated smile. I stood at the edge of the group and waited. When the applause settled and people began drifting back toward the food, my mother caught my eye from across the garden. Something in my expression must have read differently to her than usual. She crossed to me. "You seem distracted," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about Dad," I said. Her jaw tightened almost invisibly. "This isn't the time for—" "I know about the trust, Mom." The sound of the party continued around us. A server offered her a canapé and she waved him off without looking away from me. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, her voice dropping to the carefully controlled register she used when she was genuinely alarmed but refused to show it. "I know that Howard Greer's firm sent notification letters to this address 7 times, I said. "I know you contacted them and told them I was unreachable. I know the trust has been sitting for 7 years and compounding. I know it's now worth $1.84 million. And I know you know that because the current balance was included in their last correspondence." She looked at the garden, at the guests, at the champagne tower. "This is not appropriate to discuss here," she said. "Then let's go inside." We went into the house, into her formal sitting room, and she closed the door. Derek must have seen us go because he appeared 2 minutes later, and Renee followed immediately after, closing the door behind her with the quiet precision of someone positioning themselves. My mother stood near the fireplace. Derek had dropped the loose, social warmth. Renee had her arms crossed. "You need to be very careful about making accusations," Derek said. He was using his corporate voice now, the one shaped by years of professional deflection. "You clearly got some information from somewhere that's incomplete or out of context. Legal trust administration is complicated, and decisions were made for your benefit." "Derek," I said. "I have a forensic accountant's report." Silence. "I have documentation of $340,000 drawn against Mom's home equity line of credit," I continued. "I have the bank's delinquency records, which are 4 months old. I have a handwriting analysis of the authorization signatures on 2 of the draw requests. Derek's face had gone very still. I also have Renee's business registration lapse, her license history, and a record of 2 images on her portfolio website that are lifted directly from other designers' published work. Renee made a sound that was not quite a word. And I said, turning back to my mother. The letter you sent to Howard Greer's firm 7 years ago asking them to suspend beneficiary notification while you sorted out what to do with money that legally belonged to your daughter. The room was quiet except for the muffled sound of the party outside. My mother sat down on the arm of her own armchair. For the first time I could remember, she looked genuinely small. We can figure this out, Derek said quickly. His voice had changed again, softer now, the one reserved for when persuasion was the only tool left. Whatever happened, whatever decisions were made, we're family. We handle things internally. If you go to attorneys and make this formal, you're going to hurt people who love you. You're going to tear this family apart. I already have attorneys, I said. I've had them for 3 weeks. The land? Renee said abruptly. Her composure had cracked just enough that the desperation underneath was visible. If you're going to handle the trust yourself, at least let us manage the land sale. It's worth more than you might think right now with the development news, and we have a contact who can. I know what it's worth, I said. I had it appraised, and I already accepted an offer. Renee went perfectly still. What offer? The Logistics Development Group contacted my attorney directly when she registered my interest in the property last week. They had been looking for private sellers in that corridor. We negotiated and I accepted $1.1 million. The paperwork closes next Friday. The number landed in the room like something heavy dropped on a glass floor. $1.1 million, Derek said, almost to himself. Yes. He looked at Renee. She looked at the floor. My mother pressed her fingertips to her mouth. I would have sold it to you for $80,000, I said to them. That's what you offered me an hour ago. $80,000. For land that sold for over $1 million. With your own brother's employer connection as the go-between. You were going to take $1 million from me and hand me back $80,000 and tell me it was a good deal. Nobody spoke. Mom, I said, and my voice was steadier than I had expected it to be. I want you to hear something. When Dad died, I was 22 years old, and I had $4,000 in a savings account and $40,000 in student loans. I ate instant noodles for a year because I was doing my clinical internship and couldn't take on more work hours. I called you once when I had $12 in my checking account and a car repair bill due. You told me my financial stress was a consequence of my career choices. You had a letter on your desk from a law firm telling you there was $1.3 million in a trust fund with my name on it. My mother had closed her eyes. I'm not going to court, I said. I'm not calling the police tonight. But I need you to listen to me carefully right now. Because what happens next depends entirely on what you decide to do in the next few days. I opened my bag and took out a set of documents. My attorney had prepared them. The first document was a formal accounting demand, requiring my mother to provide full written disclosure of any correspondence she had received related to my father's estate and the trust, with a deadline of 10 business days. The second was addressed to Derek. It was a legal notice that the unauthorized draws against the home equity line of credit, executed using documentation that showed signs of signature fraud, had been referred to a financial crimes investigator retained by my legal team. If Derek did not voluntarily arrange repayment of the outstanding principal and arrange to bring the account current within 30 days, the investigation findings would be forwarded to both the lender and to the state attorney's office. The third document was addressed to Renee. It noted the intellectual property violations on her business website, specifically the 2 images used without authorization from their original creators, and gave her 14 days to remove the content and issue corrections to any clients or partners who had received her portfolio materials. I laid all 3 documents on my mother's coffee table. These are not threats, I said. They are the natural consequences of choices that have already been made. You all have time to address them before they become something larger. I picked up my bag. Derek's voice came sharp and sudden. You're doing this at my engagement party. In front of everyone who... I'm doing this in a closed room, I said. You're welcome to go back to your party. I walked out of the sitting room, through the hall, and out the front door. I did not go back through the garden. I sat in my car for a moment with my hands in my lap. Then I drove home. Maya was in the parking lot unloading groceries from her Civic when I pulled in. She was in her waitressing uniform, which meant she had just come off an evening shift. Lily was in the back seat in pajamas, half asleep, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "Hey," Maya said, looking at my face. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Let me help you with those bags." We carried groceries up 2 flights of stairs in comfortable quiet. Lily shuffled alongside us, blinking slowly in the hallway light. When everything was inside and Lily had been put to bed and we were sitting at Maya's kitchen table with mugs of tea, I told her everything. About the trust, about my mother's letters, about the forensic accountant, the land sale, the party, the documents, all of it. Maya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat with it for a moment. Then she said, 7 years. 7 years, I confirmed. She shook her head slowly. Not dramatically. Just the honest response of someone absorbing something genuinely hard. "I'm sorry," she said. "You deserved better than that." We sat quietly for a while. Then I said, "The night I called you, when I said I needed help with rent." Maya looked at me. "You were ready to put your emergency credit card on the line," I said, without hesitation. "Of course," she said, as if this were a completely unremarkable statement. "It was a test," I said. "I'm sorry. I needed to know who would actually show up." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did I pass?" I laughed, and it was the first real laugh I had managed in weeks. "You were the only one who did." Maya smiled and looked into her tea. "I knew something was a little off about it," she said. "You're very organized. I couldn't picture you making an accounting error big enough to get an eviction notice. But I figured if you needed help, and the rest wasn't my business." I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I had prepared it before the party. "I want you to give this to a financial advisor," I said. "His name is inside," Sandra referred him. "He's excellent with first-time investors. Tell him I sent you and that you have a sum to manage and you want to understand your options. He'll take care of you." Maya looked at the envelope like she was deciding whether to open it. "How much is in here?" she said carefully. $200,000, I said. Maya set the envelope on the table and looked at me with an expression I could not quite categorize. Not shock, exactly. Something more complicated. The face of a person who has been carrying a weight so long they have forgotten what their own shoulders feel like without it. "Claire," she said. "You have covered for me at work events when I was sick," I said. "You checked on my car in a snowstorm. You once babysat my friend's kid for 4 hours at no notice, because I asked you to. You were ready to put yourself into debt at 9:15 at night for someone you could have said no to. And you are raising a daughter alone on 2 jobs while your knees ache from double shifts, and you meal prep on Sundays so Lily eats real food, and you have never once complained about any of it to me." Maya pressed her lips together. "This doesn't make us even," I said. "It doesn't work that way. But I want Lily to be able to go to college without her mother working doubles to pay for it. I want you to have an emergency fund that's actually an emergency fund and not a cleared credit card. And I want you to be able to take 1 vacation in the next 2 years that doesn't come out of your waitressing tips." The silence that followed was long and full. "I don't know how to accept this," Maya finally said. "You say thank you," I said. "And then you let Sandra's guy manage it so it grows." She looked at the envelope for another long moment. Then she picked it up. "Thank you," she said, very quietly. We sat together until almost midnight, drinking tea and talking about things that had nothing to do with money or family. She told me about a funny thing Lily had said at dinner. I told her about a patient at the clinic who had taken their first unassisted steps that week. The conversation moved gently, like water over smooth stones. In the weeks that followed, things moved in their own way, and at their own pace. Derek engaged a personal attorney and negotiated a repayment structure with the bank. The forgery question was placed in a holding position pending my legal team's ongoing monitoring. The engagement party photographs, I noticed, were quietly removed from my mother's social media. Renee took down the borrowed images from her portfolio that same week. I do not know what conversations happened between them. I was not part of them. My mother called me 3 times. I let the first 2 go to voicemail. On the third call, I picked up and listened. She spoke for several minutes, and the speech had the particular quality of something that had been drafted and revised. She said she had made a serious error in judgment. She said she had convinced herself at the time that holding the funds would protect me from making poor decisions with a large sum at 22. She said she knew that was not adequate justification. She said she was sorry. I listened to the whole thing. "I believe that you're sorry," I said when she finished. "And I need you to understand that sorry doesn't reverse 7 years. I'm not ending our relationship, but I'm done needing your approval. Those are different things." She said she understood. I am not certain she entirely does, but I said it for myself as much as for her. The land sale closed cleanly. The trust disbursement was completed. Sandra helped me build a financial structure that will serve me for decades. Philip's firm submitted a final report and moved on to other clients. Howard Greer sent me a very formal letter of congratulations on successfully claiming the trust, which made me laugh out loud standing at my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. Maya signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in a building 3 blocks from our current complex. The second bedroom is for Lily, who will have her own space for the first time in her life. Maya cried a little when she signed the papers. She texted me a photo of the empty second bedroom the day she got the keys, just the bare floor and the window letting in afternoon light. I saved it. I think about something a lot these days. The night I called my family pretending to be in trouble, they each made a calculation. They weighed the cost of helping me against the inconvenience. And the inconvenience won. My mother chose her catering appointment. Derek chose his house purchase. Renee chose her silence, and the $600 she already owed me. Maya made a completely different calculation. Or maybe she did not calculate at all. Maybe she just heard that someone she cared about needed help and thought, okay, and started checking her credit limit. I have spent most of my life trying to earn a place at a table that was never going to have room for me. I worked harder, stayed quieter, asked for less, made peace with being the impractical one, the soft one, the one who chose a low-paying career for reasons they did not respect. None of it earned me a single honest conversation. The $1.84 million did not give me a family. What it gave me was clarity. It lit up a room I had been sitting in for years and showed me exactly what was actually there. And then it gave me the means to act on what I saw. I have a chosen family now. She drives a 15-year-old Civic and works double shifts and makes Lily's favorite soup from scratch and answers the phone at 9:15 at night. And she deserves every good thing coming her way. If you've ever had someone outside your bloodline treat you better than the people who were supposed to love you most, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story reached you, please like and subscribe to Recovery Stories. We share stories about people who found their way through and came out the other side. Because sometimes the most important thing is just knowing that someone else made it through too.